Sean, we've covered a lot with George and Drew on the Catholic vote and what Trump needs to do to garner that and get it this time around. What's your take?
You know, I think it's interesting whether you're talking about hardcore Catholics, evangelicals, Orthodox Jews. I think the more you're into your religion and the more, especially in those where you're talking about pro-life issues and the importance of the court, that's where Trump's going to find his strength. And I think that the more that he can emphasize those things that he's done and that he will do, he's already talked about the fact that he's going to put another list of judges out. That's important. He needs to reassure those voters that came with him in 2016 that not only has he delivered for them, but he's going to continue to do it. I think, you know, as Drew was saying, if he can remind them how old some of those Supreme Court justices are and the likelihood of them retiring, that's even better. There's a huge level of support for what the president did with both the Supreme Court justice picks that he had in Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. So the judiciary can be a huge help for him.
You know, something I think is interesting is the poll that we mentioned at the beginning showing Trump's favorability dropping from 60% just to 37%. And something that I'm kind of seeing in evangelical vote across the board is the fact that people are not happy with how he's dealt with his civil unrest. Do you think that's become even bigger issue? And I would say for some of these devout evangelicals who would normally say, okay, SCOTUS is a very important issue to me, but I don't like how you're handling this.
Yeah, it's a great point, Lyndsay, because between COVID and the racial unrest that's been going on, I think that, you know, and I brought this up with the president in the interview that I did with him, this idea of it's not just the policies you support, it's how you act towards your fellow citizen, your fellow human being, and showing that empathy and concern that you know, is kind of the backbone of a lot of these faiths. And so, you know, this is, again, the interesting thing is that Biden doesn't even have the record on a lot of these issues, but he's doing and saying the right things. Trump's got the record, but sometimes doesn't do or say the right thing. And it's interesting because normally he's the guy that's supposed to be the showman, right? And this time he's actually got the record. If he could just add that element to his shtick, I think he would do a lot better.
Yeah, you have a great point, because if he could just, and you ask him that, do you think that you should, as you mentioned, you know, just act a little more presidential, essentially? And he said, no, tough, you know, and that is his stick, to be tough. But I think you're right. When you look at these evangelicals and the Catholic vote, they all care about people. They care about, that's a big part of the base. And I think if he could just change that, to your point, a little bit, he would get that back, that favorability back. He really needs to go out there and show himself as a president who can be compassionate at times, even though he wants to be tough on crime.
That's right. I mean, there's two things. One is you got to show you can be the president for everyone, even the people you don't agree with, right? That's important. But the thing that's so interesting of this problem is if Biden doesn't have the record but can do the right thing, he can never get the record because he's not in office. Trump has the record but isn't necessarily saying and doing the right thing. That's something he can fix. If he can have the record and the rhetoric, combine those things together, he's going to have a huge advantage. But right now, he's got to match the rhetoric with the record.
Yeah, I know we're almost out of time here, but do you think by the time that we get to November and the election, some of this will subside and the economy will become the bigger issue for everyone and SCOTUS, or is this going to ride through to the election, the civil unrest?
You know, we've been through such a tough last 3 months. Who knows what's around the corner? But the reality is that I think you've got the economy, you've got the SCOTUS picks, but that's, you know, those are things that are unknown. What we do know, he can fix the rhetoric. And I think if he can do that, then he has to rely less on hoping that the economy does really, really well and that he's got some news on the SCOTUS. There's one thing that's completely in his control, and that's the rhetoric and the style. And that's one area where he could push it all together and I think up the vote.
I think that's great advice. All right. He just needs to listen to you, Sean.
Yeah, well, we tried that once.
All right, well, here at Newsmax, we always want to hear your feedback. And as we've mentioned before, if you have any ideas for us or issues with our programming, or if you even want to drop me and Sean a line, we would love to hear from you, or other hosts at Newsmax. I'm sure they would love to hear from you too. And you can always let us know if you're having issues with your cable provider at Newsmax, Newsmax distribution. Just use our online form, which you can find at newsmaxtv.com/feedback. All right, well, coming up, we've got our media panel here to break down the latest gibberish from the cancel culture. You're not going to believe it. And later, we've got our company quiz. You don't want to miss it. See if I can win this time.